I had thought for a long time it would be a nice thing to have Dad, since he's got such a great memory to recount the family history of his parents and grandparents and also his brothers and sisters. And I thought it would be a treasure to have for all of the families. So here with Glenn and Dad, you want to start out with? We tried to organize the family photos so that um,
Okay, could we start with the Thompson family then?
yeah, let's do that.
And the, the, I'll hold it up here, so, uh, uh, coming from the, right to the left, we have, Aunt Mary and, her great, grandson Keith Anderson we're still in touch with. The second one was Tullough, and the third was Nettie Bly and Uncle Albert, and this is my mother, Emma Thompson. And in the front was Tommy Thompson, and well, we didn't know him, I didn't know him then, and in the later years, he lived in California, and he was our favorite uncle, the only uncle there. And he sang with the San Bernardino uh, barbershop, quartet, 30 people and up to 300. And uh, we would go to San Bernardino and see their concert. And after the concert, he would have, what did they call it again? A, a really rehab deal. And he'd have a group of four singing to our children, who at that time were uh, Dan, Randy, and Angela. They had a great time. And then Ole Thompson was my grandfather, but he died the year that I was born. And my grandma, Lena Thompson, she made the best cookies in the world, and we still have the recipe in the family.
For Kringala
Yeah,
or
the chocolate ones,
oh
uh, the sort of cinnamon or something,
oh
really ginger.
oh ginger
Yeah, and
cookies.
they're
Oh,
really great. And she was born in the Dakota Territory down by Vermilion, South Dakota, and she's about 8 years old, I guess. And her her mother had passed away, and she was taking care of all the children. And the neighbors, uh, some were wiped out by some unfriendly Indians, and then I think she died at 95, but somewhere along the line, they thought she had passed away, and she was in the
more.
a morgue, which probably was the back of a furniture store or something. That's what they used to do in those days. And someone was going through, and she moved, and so she went on to live another maybe 60 years.
They realized she wasn't dead when she moved. Huh? It was the back of the furniture store because that was the cabinet
That's
maker.
the ones I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably so. Yeah,
Huh.
and I don't know where that was at, but then.
So that's Grandma Thompson
Right.
here?
And
Okay.
she died in Hills, Minnesota, and is buried there. And then to her left there is Uncle Nels.
This
And,
one?
oh no, on the front row,
Oh,
Nels.
okay.
And Nels was, he was a bachelor, and everyone loved him. He was the opposite of Tommy, Uncle Tommy. He was withdrawn and quiet. And when he passed away, his friend Orly Nelson received a cash amount, of which I don't know the amount, and it doesn't make any difference, but that was his best friend, and they were neighbors. And he left to the Tuff home uh, his farm, 160 acres, and he donated to a home, the TÜV home, and we'll talk more about the TÜV home when we come to my brother and sister Elmer Nelson, my brother-in-law, and Opal, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the Thompson family, and I believe uh, their their parents, my grandma's parents were, and probably my grandfather's parents were born in Norway, and I don't know where, but so they would be the first generation Norwegians in uh, live right near Valley Springs, South Dakota. They lived in Minnesota, a half a mile from the South Dakota border and 3 miles from the Iowa border.
Can you point out the people again, just Dad, because I wasn't really following it.
Okay,
So,
okay, going from left, from the right there to left, Aunt Mary, and I think had really so many tragedies in her life. Her her son Merritt was the father of our friend, the grandfather of our friend uh, Keith
Keith
Anderson.
Anderson. Okay, so
And
that's
Keith Merritt Anderson, his he married Elsie Swanson, and they he had a brother named Lofton, and I was up to their house, and I saw Lofton, and he was going to Augustana College, and guess what? His fiance there, and I wasn't very old, but I was old enough to know that she was a beautiful lady. And then he passed away, and then I had a brother named Otis, and we were at a picnic in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, McKinnon Park in 1941, and a big Norwegian dinner in the park. And he said, he was 18, he said, I got to eat a lot. This is my last meal because tomorrow I'm having my tonsils out. The next day he did have his tonsils out, and he was hemophilic, and he died at the age of 18. And then
on the operating.
I guess so,
Yeah.
in the hospital in Sioux
Mhm.
Falls.
So that's Mary's
Mary,
son, or
Mary's son, yes,
Merritt's brother?
Merritt's brother.
Okay.
There was
So it was
Lofton, he went
Mary's
first,
Mary's children.
and then he went.
Okay.
He was the youngest, and then it was during the war, and a couple years later, the FBI came out and looked for Otis because he hadn't registered for the draft, and
They didn't know that
they
he
didn't know
he had passed
he
away.
had passed away.
Huh.
And then Merritt, the oldest, the father of our friend Keith and Anita and
Ken.
uh,
Ken.
Ken, who lives in Colorado, and they. I was teaching in Wellington, Minnesota, and I think he had been a farm agent, but he was uh, teaching in South Dakota, and he passed away at about 45. And I remember going over to Worthington and seeing to this funeral in the Swedish Valley, Beaver Valley Church, and seeing the three little children there at the funeral left without a father. But the Elsie was a registered nurse, and she did a great job putting them all through college, and fine and upstanding and lovable people who are still our friends and relations.
So
And then,
that was Mary.
Yeah, and then Uncle Tullough, he and I didn't get to know much of him. We knew his daughter. she came when we lived in Riverside. She was the lady that came and visited us in Riverside in Gramercy Place, and had a daughter about 10 years old. And then we had the little ranch, horses and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And she left her old dirty tennis shoes there. And they wrote a letter saying, hey, we got there's tennis shoes. So we Donna packed up the old dirty snaky shoes and sent them off. And then Nettie, Nettie, she married Swen Bly, and down the line, they had several children, but down the line, the oldest girl was Lorraine, and she had a daughter named Cheryl, and Cheryl was on the Iowa girls basketball championship team. And we touched base in Colorado, and they had the motel with me. And then Dan was in the airport in Denver making a call, and her husband went by and said hi, and I said hi, and that was about it because they were both tied up. And then just this last year, so maybe 6 months ago, I found out that Cheryl was had a 623 number, and I called, and she lived in Sun City Grand, and her and Tom and Dan and I had lunch together at the Greek festival.
Right.
And
Yeah, so it's Cheryl. Nettie's
her granddaughter.
granddaughter is Cheryl. Who's
Cheryl
married,
Hill. Right.
Hill, married to Tom. Okay.
And then the other one is Uncle Tom, Albert, and he lived up somewhere northwest of Sioux Falls. And all I remember, he was a farmer, but he had a well. As
Yeah.
I was saying, Albert had a well in his farm northwest of Sioux Falls, had salt water, and their children were all older, but very beautiful girls, and they were all friends of my sister Opal, I remember.
Oh.
And then here is my mother, Emma Thompson, and she was evidently the baby of the family, and we'll hear more of her as we go along. Uncle Tommy was a farmer, and then he moved to California, and we were so grateful. Thought we had he met some of the actresses, but he was a waiter in a restaurant, and that's where he saw them. But it's made us think, wow, made me think we're really with him now. And he early on was very musical and played a trombone, and he played pickup with Lawrence Welk before Lawrence Welk went big time. And then later on in life, he was with the San Bernardino barbershop quartet. I think there's about 250 voices, but afterwards, he'd get four fellows together, and it was an afterglow. That's what it was. And the four of them would sing for Dan and Randy and Angela, and that was getting sort
Very
of special attention, you know.
Right.
And he was always at our place for Thanksgiving or Christmas. And then my grandfather, Ole Thompson, he passed away in 1927, the date of my birth, the year of my birth. And then my grandma, Lena Thompson, she made the best ginger cookies, and we always liked to go there. And she lived with her son, Nels, and she had a dumb waiter in the house where they'd put the food and go down into the basement where it'd keep cool, and we really were interested in seeing that work. And she was born in the South Dakota Territory near Vermilion, and I believe that her uh, mother must have passed away. Well, she was 8 years old, and she was taking care of the family. And some of the neighbors were massacred by the Indians. And later on, at some point, she passed away, but it wasn't really passing away. She was in the mortuary in the back of a furniture store or wherever, and someone walked by her and she moved. So she lived then to be 95 and is buried at Hills, Minnesota. And then, uh, last of all, it was Nils, and I think he must have been had polio. He had a limp, and he was a farmer and a bachelor, and he sang in the in the Norwegian choir, and he had a chance to go to sing in Norway, and he decided, oh no, I don't think I can do it, and I think we were home in Minnesota in 1962, and he had a ruptured spleen, and he passed away. And it was so sad that he did that. That they called it a Sanger Fest, in which he sang.
Mm-hmm.
And he, when he passed away, his best friend was Orly Nelson, and he left some a sizable sum of money to him, and the rest was given to an old folks home in Hills, Minnesota, the Tuff Home, which we'll hear later about more about later when we talk about my sister Opal. So that's the Thompson roots.
So continuing on with the Thompson family, just another photo of them, Dad, if you want to identify.
Right. This is later, and here is my mother. So she looks like she's maybe in her
That
30s or so, and their uh, uncle Tommy then was a farmer for a little while, but then his barn burnt down, and they used to, if they put hay in green, that sometimes the could combustible make a fire. And so there's nothing new on it, it's just a later day photo.
But who are the other people? Are they the same
Oh, here's
folks?
Grandma now, gray haired, and there's
So that's Grandma Thompson?
Grandma Thompson, uh, Albert, Nettie, Mary Thompson, Nettie, uh, Tullough, my mother, Nils, and there weren't many planes flying by then, but he was looking up in the sky, and
And Tommy.
Uncle Tommy, yeah,
Again, so I recognize Tommy,
right,
and that's
Grandma
Grandma
Thompson.
Thompson.
And this is Nettie,
Okay,
Nettie
Nettie Bly is what she.
and Nels, and they had a 34 Ford, and it looked like they're almost stuck in the mud, and they were probably down in Radcliffe, Iowa, visiting Mary.
Oh, okay. And then this photo is of Uncle Tommy and Grandma Thompson?
Right, and it's at
Your Grandma Thompson.
yeah, and it looks like it's at Nettie Bly's home in Hills, Minnesota.
Okay. And the next photo, Dad, is
Right.
sort of an interesting one.
Mary Thompson married Mr. Anderson, and their son Laughlin was engaged to a lady named Erickson in Sioux Falls, and she had a brother who was a small person, and he used to come out to the Anderson farm, and he later was in The Wizard of Oz in 1941. And here he's standing by Grandma Thompson's little big cat, and Uncle Tommy, Otis Anderson, I was up to their farm, maybe 5, 6 years old, and he showed me a suit, and he said, "How?"
Uncle Tommy did?
No, Otis.
Oh.
Otis Anderson showed me a suit, and it was just a little kid suit. And I said, "How old?" He said, "How old do you think this guy that wore the suit?" And I said, 5. And he said, 21. So it was a picture. It was a suit of Cale Erickson, and then
K.O.?
Cale is what he was
K.O.
called.
Erickson?
And then we lived about 15 miles from Sioux Falls, and we went to Sioux Falls once, and I must have been 6 or 7 years old, and he was selling papers on the corner, August, August, get your August leader. And I went up and said, "Hi," and he says, "Keep moving, kid," because I still thought he was a kid, and it was probably a bit annoying to have another uh, farm kid like me come up to him and be seen with me in public.
Uh, so, okay, Dad. Then the next photo that we have is of your mom, Grandma Rye, Emma, and is that one of her brothers then?
That is Nels.
Oh, so that's
And
Nels?
this was in 1962. That's Elmer Nelson's farm, his barn, and we were back from California in 1962, and we had a meeting of all of the families, and Nels would be the only one from the original Thompson family who was there, but all of my brothers and sisters were there.